It's 1.8 million years ago. You're a human, technically. You've got a sloping forehead, a body built for walking all day under a brutal sun, and a brain that's slowly getting bigger for reasons nobody's bothered to explain to you. You spend most of your time looking for food, avoiding things that want to eat you, and being mildly suspicious of the other members of your group. And then, one evening, two of those group members wander off behind a rock. And they're not hunting, they're not gathering, they're not doing anything that helps anyone survive. They're just enjoying themselves. This is the story of how sex stopped being a chore and started being a choice. How one species, yours, took a biological function designed purely to make copies of itself and turned it into something it does for fun, for comfort, for boredom on a Tuesday. And the answer to when it happened is far older, far stranger, and far more uncertain than anyone ever taught you. Because here's the thing nobody tells you. Sex for pleasure doesn't start with humans. It doesn't even start with the question you think it does. We tend to assume there was some moment, a first time, when an ancestor discovered that this whole reproduction business felt good, but that's backwards. Pleasure was never the discovery. Pleasure was the engine. It was there long before anything resembling a human existed, doing exactly one job, making sure animals kept reproducing. The real mystery isn't when sex started feeling good. It's when it stopped being only about that, when it broke free from the calendar of fertility and became something our ancestors did simply because they wanted to. And there's one piece of evidence for this, a single, slightly absurd biological fact about the human body that we'll get to. But first, we have to go back. Way back. Let's start with the oldest part of this story, the reward system. Hundreds of millions of years ago, long before mammals, evolution ran into a problem. Reproduction is costly. It's risky. It takes time and energy, and it occasionally gets you eaten. So how do you convince an animal to do something dangerous and exhausting, over and over, with no understanding of why? You bribe it. You wire its brain so that the act itself releases a flood of chemicals. Dopamine, the same molecule behind every craving you've ever had, that says, in the only language a nervous system understands, do that again. The pleasure isn't a side effect. It's the entire point. It's a survival mechanism dressed up as a good time. And that's billions of years of programming sitting in your skull right now. Now, here's where it gets interesting. For almost every animal that has ever lived, that bribe comes with a strict schedule. It's called estrus. You probably know it as heat. In most mammals, females are only fertile and only interested and only receptive for a narrow window, a few days, and the body advertises it. Swelling, scent, behavior, sometimes a color change so obvious you could spot it across a field. The message is loud and clear. The window is open, act now. Outside that window, nothing. No interest, no receptivity, no point. Which means for most of life on Earth, sex and reproduction are the same event. They're locked together. You don't get one without aiming for the other. There is no for fun. There is only in season. So the question of when humans started having sex for pleasure is really a different question in disguise. It's the question of when one species threw out the schedule. And to understand that, we have to talk about the strangest thing your body does without telling you. Here's where it gets genuinely strange. Human females have something biologists call concealed ovulation, and it might be one of the most important quiet revolutions in our entire evolution. The basic idea is this. Unlike almost every other primate, a human female's fertile window is hidden. There's no swelling, no obvious signal, no flashing sign that says the door is open. In many cases, the woman herself doesn't consciously know when she's ovulating. The information that virtually every other animal broadcasts to the world has, in humans, been switched off. Think about what that does. If you can't tell when reproduction is possible, then sex stops being tied to reproduction. It can't be scheduled around a window nobody can see, so it spreads out. It happens across the whole cycle, most of which isn't fertile at all, which means the vast majority of human sex, then and now, was never going to make a baby in the first place. And that's the moment it changes. The instant fertility went invisible, sex was quietly freed to become about something else. Bonding, comfort, pleasure, connection. So when did the schedule disappear? This is where I have to be honest with you. We don't know. Concealed ovulation doesn't fossilize. There's no bone that records it, no tool that proves it. The best we can do is reason backwards from anatomy and behavior, and the estimates are wide, anywhere from a couple of million years ago in early Homo to far, far earlier. But here's the thing. One researcher pushed the date back further than almost anyone expected, and he did it using a skeleton with a nickname. Now, let's go back about 4.4 million years, because this is where the evidence gets weird, and where that absurd biological detail I promised you finally shows up. There's a fossil. Her name is Ardi, short for Ardipithecus ramidus, and she's one of the oldest near-complete skeletons of a human ancestor ever found. And an anatomist named Owen Lovejoy looked at her and made a genuinely strange argument. He argued that the roots of human sexuality were already there more than 4 million years ago, long before big brains, long before tools, long before fire. His reasoning went like this. Artie's species didn't have the giant fighting teeth you see in male chimps, the daggers males use to compete over fertile females. The males seem to have stopped competing the way our other relatives do, and Lovejoy's theory was that something replaced the fighting. A deal. Males who formed lasting bonds with females, who provided food and stuck around, did better. And the glue that held that bond together wasn't the fertile window. It was a sexual relationship that worked all the time, fertile or not. That's the bribe again. But aimed at a new target. Not reproduce. Stay. Now here's the absurd detail. Look at human anatomy, and you'll find features that make almost no sense if sex is purely about reproduction, features that exist, as far as anyone can tell, largely for pleasure and bonding. The clitoris has no reproductive function whatsoever. None. It is, biologically speaking, an organ dedicated entirely to feeling good. Evolution does not usually build things for fun. It built this, and that tells you something. A body keeps the machinery it uses. The fact that we are walking around with elaborate pleasure hardware decoupled from making babies is itself a fossil of sorts. It's evidence written into the living body that for a very, very long time, sex in our lineage has been about more than reproduction. Which brings us back to the question we started with. When did ancient humans first have sex for pleasure? The honest answer is that there may never have been a first. There was no inventor, no discovery, no behind-the-rock revelation. The capacity was likely there before we were even human, sliding gradually over millions of years, from something we did on a schedule to something we did because we wanted to. Pleasure didn't arrive, the schedule just quietly left. Let's also talk about our closest living relatives, because they connect to all of this in a way that's rarely discussed and frankly a little startling. Meet the bonobo. Bonobos and chimpanzees are the two species most closely related to us on Earth. We share an ancestor with both. And chimps are, let's say, complicated, aggressive, hierarchical, prone to violence. Bonobos took a different road. Bonobos use sex for almost everything except reproduction. They use it to greet each other, to calm tension before a meal, to make up after a squabble, to say sorry, to say hello, to diffuse a fight before it starts. For bonobos, sex is less like reproduction and more like a handshake, a social tool for keeping the peace. And the point isn't that we are bonobos. We're not. The point is that we are looking at a close cousin in whom sex has completely broken free of reproduction and become pure social currency, which tells us this isn't some bizarre human glitch. It's a door that evolution has walked through more than once, in more than one species near us on the family tree. The gap between that ancient pattern and your modern life is smaller than it feels. Strip away the candlelight and the playlists and the apps, and the underlying drive is the same one that bonded Artie's species 4 million years ago. We pair up, we bond, we use closeness to hold relationships together through the long, unfertile, ordinary stretches of life, which is to say, almost all of it. There's a quiet ethical weight here too, and it's worth sitting with for a second. For most of human history, sex carried enormous risk and almost no choice. The freedom to treat it as connection rather than consequence, the thing we now take completely for granted, is recent, fragile, and was paid for by an enormous amount of biology and history doing the heavy lifting first. Both the bonobo and the human are doing the same fundamental thing, using pleasure to stay close. Almost everything else is different. The drive underneath is identical. So, when did ancient humans first have sex for pleasure? The honest answer is that they didn't, not in the way the question assumes. There was no first time, no moment of discovery, no clever ancestor who figured it out. The pleasure was always there, the oldest bribe in biology, sitting in the brain long before we existed. What changed wasn't the pleasure, it was the purpose. Slowly, over millions of years, our lineage let go of the schedule. Fertility went invisible, sex went quiet and constant and bonding and ours. We didn't invent sex for pleasure, we inherited it, and then we built our entire social world on top of it. Go back to that scene at the start. Two figures 1.8 million years ago wandering off behind a rock for no reason that helps anyone survive. It looks like a waste of time and energy. It looks like nothing. But it isn't nothing. It's the foundation of pair bonds, of families, of the closeness that let a fragile, slow, soft-skinned ape build everything that came after. So the next time someone tells you sex is just biology, you can tell them the truth. It's biology that quietly stopped following the rules, and in doing so, became the thing that holds us together. We are the species that turned a survival mechanism into a way of belonging to each other, and that might be the most human thing we ever did.